the push to do it, and they jumped at it, which was great. It was actually bait. It was candy, and they ran right into it. Paul Ryan now, but interesting enough, come on, he's the House Speaker. He changed his tune on disgraceful for the Democrat deal, and here's what he said. House Speaker said that the president accepting a budget deal from the Democrats was perfectly rational and reasonable. He said this yesterday after calling the deal disgraceful. Now, he gave an interview, the House Speaker, Paul Ryan, he's, the House Speaker from Wisconsin. He said to increase the debt ceiling, Ryan explained why Trump made the decision and called it perfectly reasonable. He made the comments on Fox News to Martha McCallum, if you didn't see that interview. He says, when you look at the deal that was struck in the room for the 3-month deal debt ceiling, McCallum asked, some are sizing it up and saying that the president really was speaking to Republican leadership. He was saying that this was a signal to you guys. What do you say to that? He says, well, look, what he's trying to do is clear the decks so we can get focused on big things like tax reforms, Ryan answered. He says, I've spoken to the president a lot about this. He explained, I talked to him this morning, and he wants to clear the decks so we can basically get our jobs done and focus on our big issues like tax reform, border security, and the rest. Second point is that we're getting hit with 2 hurricanes. He continued, we're still dealing with Harvey in Texas and Louisiana. We're just now getting hit with Irma, and he wanted to make this a bipartisan moment. And where we're wanting to, we're fighting each other up in Washington about hurricane. We don't want to be fighting. He just wanted to get it done, get it out of the way, Ryan added. So that aid is flowing to the states that need it right now so that we can go and then focus on things like tax reform. So it's perfectly reasonable and rational why he's doing what he's doing, he concluded. It was rational. Donald Trump's a deal maker. That's what he does. And I think really, I think it's absolute genius deal. Even Bill Clinton, and it was his second term that he actually started working with Republicans and got a deal done, and worked very well with Republicans because he realized that he wasn't going to be able to get a lot done. And this was a good thing for Democrats to say, what are we going to deny those that need help right now and the hurricanes for money? We're not going to fund it. We're not going to fund the government. Of course we're going to do it. So this was a good moment for Democrats. This was a nice bipartisan effort. And Ryan, I think, totally understood what was going on. The clearing of the decks is good, and it's a good strategy, and hopefully this will wake up some of these idiots on the right that have been gridlocking this thing and holding up so many things in Washington. But I got to give it to Donald Trump. I think it was a great moment for him, and I don't know how long this is going to carry over, honestly, on the left. It would be nice to see more of this, but I'm not holding my breath, to be honest with you. But, I'm trying to be positive about this. Hurricane Irma expected to hit U.S., and this is a date in history, 117 years after Texas Great Storm. It was September 8th, a Category 4 hurricane made landfall in the U.S., killing thousands of people, leaving behind lasting devastation. The hurricane, which would become known as the Great Storm, ravaged Galveston, Texas in 1900, exactly 117 years before Hurricane Irma. The Atlantic Ocean's most potent storm that is expected to continue to trek across the Caribbean and slam into Florida. Between 6,000 and 1,200 people died in 1900 after this massive storm hit the southern Texas island, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration report. And they go on to say more than 3,500 buildings were destroyed. The storm brought in darkness, winds up to 140 miles an hour, 15-foot storm surge of water, according to the Houston Chronicle. It destroyed the commercial city that sat less than 9 feet above sea level at the time. Home to 35 churches, 30 hotels, 484 saloons, and the biggest opera house in Texas. Several people drowned and many others were killed by flying debris as they tried to escape, according to accounts. The storm was able to wreak so much havoc in part because of the nation's unprotectiveness and unawareness of the time of the severity of these storms. Sophisticated weather forecasting technology did not exist at the time, but the U.S. Weather Bureau issued warnings at that time telling people to move to higher ground. However, these advisories were ignored by many vacationers and residents alike, said History.com. So a little history for you. 117 years, folks. Exactly 117 years before Hurricane Irma. So hurricanes, folks, have done damage. And this one has already destroyed many island towns in the Caribbean, about 450 miles southeast of Miami, Florida, as of Friday morning. Traveling west-northwest at approximately 18 miles an hour. Tropical storm winds are likely to arrive in the Florida Keys and South Florida Saturday. Preparations should be rushed to completion, according to the National Hurricane Center, the Atlantic Ops Center. That's a tweet for them just now. Watching the storm in Tampa, Florida. That's where we do the show. The show comes to you Monday through Friday right here from Studio 1A, right down from Fox 13. If you want to query it, see it on a map, got to see what's going to happen here in this flood zone. You can keep up with it. Just you can type in Fox 13 on West Kennedy. I'm at 3140 West Kennedy, right across from State Vacuum. So if you want to look at it on a map on Google Earth, you'll see the actual building that I'm in. You won't see the studio. You can see a picture of the studio at forthepeopleshow.com. But we're getting ready. We're not getting caught off guard here. Plenty of batteries and power and all that good stuff here, making it happen. This morning, 8.1 quake in Mexico. Did you hear about it? It hit about 73 miles off Tres Picos, Mexico, along with Mexico's southern coast. The epicenter 102 miles west, and I think I'm pronouncing this correct, Tapachula in southern Chiapas state, that had a depth of about 21 miles. The quake was so powerful, according to the locals there, it sent people fleeing from buildings 650 miles away in Mexico City. So they're assessing whether the 8.0 off the coast of Chiapas, Mexico earthquake poses any tsunami threat. And this happened early in the morning that we're reading this here. But there was a Pacific tsunami warning center early this morning confirming tsunami waves in Mexico, with the largest wave so far measuring 2.3 feet. And smaller tsunami waves were observed on the coast or measured by ocean gauges in several other places. The center's forecast said Ecuador, El Salvador, and Guatemala could see waves of a meter or less. They're in El Salvador and Guatemala. So city protection officials in Mexico checking for damage. The quake was so powerful that frightened residents in Mexico City fled apartment buildings, often in their pajamas, and gathered in groups in the street. Around midnight, buildings swayed strongly for more than a minute, losing light fixtures from ceilings. Helicopters crisscrossed the sky above Mexico City with spotlights. It was a heck of a scene, folks, there in Mexico. The U.S. Geological Survey said reported a magnitude 5.7 aftershock about 12 minutes later. And so far after that, there have been up to 13 aftershocks. He said, we have reports of some damage and the death of one person, even though we still don't have exact details, Morales said. He said that the possible death occurred in San Marcos State near the border with Mexico. Lucy Jones is a seismologist in California who works for the U.S. Geological Survey, said such a quake was to be expected. And off the west coast of Mexico is what's called the subduction zone. It's what they call it there. The Pacific plate is moving under the Mexican peninsula, she said. It's very flat fault, so it's a place that has big earthquakes relatively often because of that. and there's likely to be a small tsunami going to the southwest. It's going to be coming up and affecting California or Hawaii, she said, for a tsunami generation, and an 8 is relatively small. An 8. Relatively small. I guess it could have been worse. Kind of scary, though. It has done quite a bit of damage, and they say that the death toll is supposedly because some faulty construction there, and a lot of these buildings are not built to code, unfortunately. But people took to the street real quickly because they don't trust it, because they know some of these aftershocks can be as strong. So they did the right thing to just get out and try to get away from the buildings. Very, very smart. Did you know that this past week that there was a strong solar flare that scrambled Earth's communications? It happened Wednesday, the biggest in 12 years. Caused hour-long radio blackouts in some places on Earth, and may still damage satellites and power systems in the next 2 days. Space Weather Protection Center said that the sun emitted 2 high-density solar flares. The second one was the most intense since 2005. London's Daily Mail reported on Thursday that it was strong enough to scramble radio communications on the side of the Earth facing the sun, along with low-frequency communications used in navigation. NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory, which watches the sun constantly, captures images of both events. What did NASA say? He said both flares erupted from an active sun region labeled AR 2673, all you sun gazers. Also produced a mid-level solar flare on Monday, and the second flare was the sun's largest flare so far in the current solar cycle. Space.com said that the sun can release a cloud of energetic plasma from its body in an event called coronal mass ejection, and the acronym is CME. According to the Daily Mail, experts said that the coronal mass ejection could reach Earth within the next 2 days, and that this could damage satellites, communication, and power systems. So people are still watching out for these flares. And this was accompanied by radio emissions that suggest that there is a potential for a CME. Space Weather Protection Center said scientist Rob Stenberg. However, we have to wait until we get some corneograph imagery that would capture the event for a definitive answer. So the solar surge caught some experts off guard because the sun was approaching its solar minimum, its lowest level of activity in its 11-year cycle. He says we're headed towards solar minimum, but the interesting thing about this is that you can still have events. They're just not as frequent, Steinberg said, per Space.com. We're not having X flares every day or for a week, for instance. The activity is less frequent, but no less potentially strong. These kinds of events are just part of living with a star. And that star is our sun, and we actually need it. Just remember, back in the early 1900s, the Western Union lines were fried because of EMP, from the sun, and it cooked all the Western Union lines. So it was pretty bad, folks. Anyways, the sun does that, and the scary thing about it is, according to scientists and for anybody concerned with navigation and satellites, I mean, all our GPSs, satellites, television, the military, I mean, we're so dependent upon satellites today, it's not even funny. So there is some protection, from what I understand, they put on those satellites, but it's not complete, and they're exposed to so much more of the radiation up there. It's not even funny. I always love when the weather starts turning a little bit cooler, and maybe you like it. Starbucks, as if it's not already pricey to actually go there, they're quietly raising their prices as of this Tuesday at unknown numbers of locations, with coffee costs rising 10 to 20 cents, and mocha lattes, sandwiches, and cookie prices are raising up to 30 cents. Not all locations received the increases, according to Starbucks. They were telling Business Insider, and only about 10% of menu items went up in price. So the coffee chain didn't say how many